a bilateral event and debate common issues that are interesting for both countries. But we managed in the end to convince partners, namely Black Sea regional, Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, that civil society can support decision makers to find solutions, not only to criticize public institutions. Our intention is to offer a long-term support for our government to overcome problems in the bilateral cooperation between Romania and Ukraine, and in the end to act as a proactive actor in order to obtain common benefits for the citizens of both countries. I would like to invite Gerasimchuk, our partner from Ukraine, to offer to you his welcome message. But I invite you not as our partner, but as a colleague and a friend. Please,
Thank you so much, Angela. Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure and good privilege to be here at the opening of the Ukrainian Civil Society Forum. Yesterday we already had a preliminary meeting in Gash, and today we will go on more discussions here in Bucharest. And yesterday I started my opening speech with a joke about my friend in Ukraine who is chairing his organization. And often he is joking that he is in a youth movement since 1991, which is more or less the same for many of us, because we are in bilateral relations studies for many years. And we know each other, we know ideas of each other, we are friends already. However, this forum is something special because of a few reasons. The reason number one is that except for the people who are involved in bilateral relations studies, now we have people with specific expertise on the issues of mutual concern. And this concern in our forum will be hybrid threats, which are generated by third party, mainly Russian Federation, and we have a brilliant team of Ukrainian experts involved in stop fake initiatives, involved in debunking fake news, and I do believe that Ukraine has a lot to tell about that. And during yesterday's discussions, it became clear that it's not only Ukraine, but also the other countries of the region that eventually may face or already face the same challenges, and the experience we gained, we are ready to share. A second breakthrough, which I believe is to be highlighted, is that for many years, when dealing with Ukraine-Romania relations and studying all the ups and downs of these relations, we are mainly focused on the dialogue of civil society. Nowadays, we extended this dialogue to governmental institutions as well. And I would like to express my gratitude to both sides, like Ukrainian embassy in Romania and also Romanian diplomats who support the idea and who are ready to listen to alternative decisions, alternative policies elaborated by think tanks, by civil society actors. And I do believe that we are going to have a very fruitful cooperation. And finally, I am sure that except for describing common problems and threats, except for describing the issues in bilateral relations, including sensitive issues which are still on the agenda, we also have to take into consideration our regional interests, which are sometimes common. And that's another topic that needs to be highlighted in today's discussion, the elections in Moldova, in the Republic of Moldova, which are of mutual interest for both Romania and Ukraine, who are the only neighbors of the Republic of Moldova, and who are definitely interested in success story of the Republic of Moldova, because it would be a success story of the region as well. So I'm very glad to see you all here. I'm very glad to welcome you. I do express my gratitude to our donors, and this time it's Black Sea Trust and International Renaissance Foundation from Ukraine. And I wish everybody to have a fruitful discussion. And I also wanted to give a floor to Ambassador of Ukraine to Romania, Mr. Banko. The floor is yours.
ladies and gents, hello everyone. I will try to be as short as possible because actually, Angela and Sergey, thank you so much. You already presented the idea. For me, this idea of regaining the movement of Ukrainian, Romanian civil society forum or expert forum, as you wish, was the idea to support also the authorities, I mean the Ministry of Foreign Affairs primarily, and also other institutions and state institutions, using your ideas, maybe alternative thoughts, maybe alternative vision of the situation, but nevertheless, it's very important to hear also from you, how do you see the development of our bilateral relations, and how do you see or foresee the perspectives of these bilateral relations. As Sergey mentioned, we do have sensitive issues, and I hope very much that this event will raise also these sensitive issues, and you will have the possibility to discuss everything actually that exists on the bilateral agenda between Ukraine and Romania. But mainly the main actually topic of this event is our hybrid threats, and I definitely believe that this topic will be very interesting for debating today, because we all, not only Ukraine, Republic of Moldova or Romania, especially taking into consideration the elections in 3 countries, but the whole region and the whole Europe, or even the whole world, is facing now a new era of digital threats. I mean, not only hybrid warfare using by Russia, but also information war using by different agents everywhere in the world. And now we are trying to debate on the issue how to overcome this post-truth, or how you may call it as you want, but the main idea is how not to be caught in the campaign of disinformation, of fake news, or other threats which exist actually every day around us. I want to thank also German Marshall Fund and the Legacy Trust Fund for supporting this event. Me and my team as an embassy, we were also always near both sides. I mean, civil society represented by ESGA and ESGA as leading teams from Romania and Ukraine, trying to support you in this effort to organize this event. And once again, I'm very glad that we managed. And also, I hope very much that this event will not be the only one dedicated to this topic in the bilateral dialogue. But this is going to be the start of respective collaboration between civil societies and NGOs, both from Romania and Ukraine. And we're going to have the continuation of this dialogue this year, next year, or the years to come, because we definitely need this dialogue to support also the official dialogue, because not all the issues we can discuss openly using diplomatic channels, but definitely we can discuss them using, if I may, using you as a civil society, and have the benefits of this dialogue, or even some ideas from you as the participants actually of this bilateral dialogue and this bilateral cooperation. So once again, thank you very much to all of you for participation, and once again, thank you, Sergey, and thank you, Angela, for making this effort and for making this to come true and to come to reality. Wish you all very productive and good dialogue, open change of minds and thoughts, and all the best and good luck.
So we have a very interesting topic for debate today, and we talked a lot about the topic, because our intention is not only to discuss the problems but also to come with solutions to overcome our sensitive issues in the bilateral dialogue. But maybe it's time to start with what we have as a problem in common, not in our bilateral dialogue, but in the region. That's why we have included today also Moldova in our sessions. I would like to declare the forum open, and I will invite the first panelist on the floor. And Sergei Gerasimchuk is your moderator for the first session, and you will see that the knowledge that the experts from Ukraine have to share today with us is very important for Romanian experts. Sergei, please.
So thank you once again, and I'm glad to invite the panel Ms. Katerina Druk, and also the host at Stone Initiative, Ukrainian initiative famous for debunking propaganda and myths. Welcome, Katerina. Also, I'm glad to invite Ms. Katerina, the journalist from Press One, Yuzhna Poka, and it's very important to have regional dimension as well, because very often we are concentrated very much on Bucharest and Kyiv, but we also need experts from the regions. And I also invite Alexandra Tsakhanovska, senior analyst at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, the initiative which also emerged after the war with Russia started. And Mr. Razvan Munteanu, president of Chamber of Excellence in International Affairs. Razvan Munteanu. Okay, maybe he's late. So, Ms. Hanna Shast, Ukrainian Analytica magazine. Anna Maria Luka, journalist from Balkan Insight, a very important resource which I use often. And Vitaly Moroz, head of new media at Internet Media. So I would suggest that our speakers limit themselves to 7 up to 10 minutes during the presentation, because we have 7 speakers, but perhaps if because of the traffic jams our other speakers will be late for their performance, then we have some more time. And definitely we will have a discussion. And the first speaker for this panel is Ms. Katerina Druk. I invite Katerina.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Yes. Okay. I won't hide that for me it's already 5 years that I'm constantly speaking on the topic of disinformation, and I do very much happy to declare that the path is changing very much. I mean, the learning path and the learning curve of people who take part in the conferences, but also those who attend, and the general level of understanding on the threats. When back in Ukraine, together with Fed in early March 2014, we started with debunking fakes. First of all, collecting this incredible amount of false information which started emerging in Ukraine, not only during Maidan and the Revolution of Dignity, but also in the first days of the takeover operation Crimea. I would also very much like to highlight that 2018 is a very special year for Ukraine. In these days, we commemorate the 5th anniversary of the illegal annexation and occupation of Crimea, and the information element of the takeover operation was paramount. That is why it's very much important to see the potential threat of the hybrid challenges that Russia is posing, especially in the disinformation field, because as many military experts have conducted different studies around the takeover operation of Crimea, and many of them actually have pointed out that information element of this operation was sometimes even more important than the physical presence of the legal free men themselves on the ground. because the information which was used to distort the reality in order to create a false image of what is going on. Even in Ukraine, we're still fighting with several false stories of fake narratives or fake perception of the realities back then that happened in our country. And obviously, it's even much harder to explain something what happened in Ukraine and Ukrainian to the outside world. But I wanted to highlight the story just to show you how important the issue that we're talking about is. It's not all about some fake news or stupid stories that emerge on the internet and you can find plenty of them. This is their real threat and real importance that when the critical situation comes, the perpetrator or a villain or aggressor can use this vulnerability and can use this information shield in order to cover the wrongdoings, the crimes which can be used or done in different countries. But when it comes to fake news or when it comes to disinformation itself, obviously it would be very wrong to say that this is a phenomenon that we started facing only 5 years ago. Obviously, propaganda, distorting information, using so-called useful idiots, they have been known to the societies and to the countries for many, many years. What has changed in the recent decades is the incredible technological growth. Thanks to your smartphones, actually each and every one of you can become a victim of the information activities of other countries or governments or politicians or different groups. Not only if you're a prominent politician, not only if you pay some high position in your society, but even if you're an ordinary citizen. And those are two very common mistakes that people make. Sometimes they say, I'm just an ordinary teacher or a student or an NGO person or working in the State Department. Doesn't mean like that. And I'm just an ordinary person. Who would, for example, target me with some propaganda or disinformation? Who would collect my private data? Everyone is important. In the war on information, in the disinformation war, every single one of you is important, and every single one of you is under threat and can be a potential victim. Another thing, what many people actually say, they're thinking that disinformation activities and fake news and cyber threats, they're somewhere in Georgia, maybe in Moldova, definitely in Ukraine, because Ukraine and Russia are waging an open war right now. This is a great underestimation that we see that the world, especially Europe and the US, only started uncovering in the recent years, understanding that they're also the threat. They also have the threat of disinformation activities by Russia, and they're also victims. And in this regard, the experience of Ukraine over the past 5 years is incredibly important, because Russia has been using Ukraine to our great, obviously, disadvantage as a testing ground for many methods and techniques that lately have been used in Western countries and still are being used. That is why close following of what is going on in Eastern Europe may give you the very necessary knowledge of what to expect in Western countries or in your countries, for example. But knowing that the time is really very limited, and obviously I'm not trying to bore you that much or make you so much afraid of what is going on in the outside world, I would only like to point out to several very much important issues. First of all, yes, we're talking obviously all the time about the disinformation activities, about the information warfare of Russia, and obviously we're here to share our very relevant Ukrainian experience. But it is really very much important for representatives of every single country to understand that the threats in information field or the information security is actually vulnerable in every single state. It doesn't matter whether you share the common border with Russia or your border with Russia might be 1,000 kilometers away. In internet age, there are no limits, there are no borders, and we are very much incredibly intertwined. This is something that you have to keep in mind. Second thing, sometimes there are no obstacles of language, of distance, of different religions and so on and so forth in order to be targeted by the disinformation. The mechanisms, or rather the algorithm, is very much the same. What you have to do as the representatives of your civil society, of your government, of your analytical institutions, is to conduct thorough researches of your own communities, of your own information space. Because every single time there are certain cracks, there are certain possibilities that can be used, they definitely will be used. Either by foreign governments, and in this regard we're talking about hostile influences that Russia is making, but also in the cyber field, one shouldn't forget China and recent increase of Chinese activities all over the world. That is why we actually face hybrid threats from many different directions. But unfortunately, and once again, Ukraine is a very good example to that, we can see that the mechanisms or the algorithms which were elaborated by Russia, quite often they can be misused or used by the domestic politicians, by the domestic marginal groups. So unfortunately, it's not only the prerogative of Olkino, so infamous, notorious Charles factory outside St. Petersburg, but it's also the political farms of boards and trawls which are harvested in many other countries as well. That is why it is really very much important not only to be very much aware of the threats coming from the outside, but also learn what is going on in your own countries. In this regard, my very final remarks would be not to regard disinformation threats in a very narrow sense of it. Not only fake news, not only manipulations with data and reports of propaganda is the subject that we're talking about. This is really very narrow understanding, which in 2019 isn't even close to explain and to describe the entire plethora and the complexity of the issue. What is really very much important to understand and to remember is that Kremlin's hand is playing with our lives. You see, they're everywhere. We're joking, but the interference is everywhere. But on the more serious note, what is really something that should be remembered is that one should very much closely follow their own legal system, because from, once again, example from Ukraine, but also from other countries, quite often we have many loopholes in our legal system, and those are the open doors that actually we keep wide open for all the hostile influences that can be used against the security and the strength of our societies and of our countries. So before pointing out that Russia is an aggressor, China is an aggressor, ISIS is an aggressor, and so on and so forth, Iran and other countries, name whatever. One should remember that we should start from our own societies and our own countries, because there are, in every single country, there are a lot of different problems. And it's really very naive and it's really very false to assume that all the bad things and all the different quarrels and cleavages in the societies, they come from the outside world. No, they're always born here in the country, in the given country, but they're always, quite often, in most of the cases, they're exploited by the external actors in order to make the countries weaker from the inside. And my last point would be, once again, going back to this notion that disinformation activities and information warfare is much, much bigger and wider than just a fake news, is the principle of follow the money and check your own politicians, check your own think tankers and experts, the conferences they conduct, the narratives that they pursue, because quite often the perpetrator is not the one who is running around the shade and shouting, I'm a supporter of Russian world, or I'm a supporter of Russia and Putin's regime is the best one. Sometimes the most notorious ones are those who are quietly, step by step, drop by drop, at every conference and every TV show, spill you with some propaganda, spill you with some narratives. That is why this is something that you should take away from Ukrainian example, from Ukrainian experience, but always take and invest this knowledge and those lessons learned into your own domestic societies, because every single person is under threat. And the best news in this one, although we are potentially all subjects of disinformation activities coming from various sectors, not only from Russia, that we're talking about right now, but your level of understanding that you might be potentially threatened, or your critical thinking is the best weapon you can have against all the potential different types of disinformation activities. Once again, there is no plugin, there is no computer program, there is no NGO or an expert on a TV show with 100% or legislation, some regulation that would ban certain websites or TV stations or newspapers that would 100% make you secure and protected from all the different kinds of information threats. They're coming from different directions, from your own politicians, from marginal groups, from radicals, from commercial interests, and so on and so forth. But if you're understanding that you're under threat, and you're always very much cautious and exceptional in your information field, in the people that you're talking to, opinions that you share, your Facebook feeds, the friends that you have there, the information sources that you read, and so on and so forth, you can always become much more protected, but it's in your own hands.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much thank you for two reasons. First reason, you are a very good example because it's 10 minutes only, and it's a good example for the rest of the speakers. Also, thank you because in your presentation, we are lucky to have you as the first speaker, because it was truly a wake-up call, was literally and illiterally. Yeah. And I do hope that the further discussion will be no less appealing to the audience, and I happy to give the floor to Dr. Simina, who will share about the Romanian perspective of the situation. Thank you.
My name is Codruța Simina. I'm a journalist. I work for Press One. That's an independent media project online in Romania. I'm not really used to speaking public, so I may have some emotions that I would very much ask you to forgive me for that. I may be shorter than 10 minutes.
That would be great.
Because actually I prepared a very brief presentation. Starting from our own subject, the challenges that we have in Romania concerning the problem of disinformation, and what I am covering, online disinformation and misinformation. And I would really like to underline that I don't know if it's okay for us to use the term fake news. I think it's much more healthier if we call it a lie, or if we call it disinformation or misinformation or manipulative information. Because I think the term fake news is really vague, and we're going to end up calling it from one to the other. So I'm going to go back. The first time that I really thought about the challenges that we have is when my 10-year-old daughter came to me and asked me, Mom, is it true that the European Union wants to shut down the internet? So that's when I said, okay, we have a problem. Now let's see, where did you read that? So she's allowed to have an Instagram account, and she found that out on Instagram. So I actually did a fact checking with her, and that's when I realized that first of all, our children and the youth is really very exposed to lots and lots of information, and nobody teaches them how to filter it. So the next thing I thought about is that we should have a really strong program for educating our kids and our teenagers how to consume media, how to consume information, how to consume the tons of texts that are reaching out to them, and they believe almost everything because it's on the internet, and because no one takes the time to tell them that if you see it on the internet or at the television, it's not necessarily true. So, a strong education program would be possible, I think, if the subject of misinformation and disinformation would be mainstream in Romania, but it is not. There are a few of us, a few journalists who cover small bits of this because it's really hard for independent media projects to have that amount of money or that amount of time to spend on documenting bigger cases. Usually what we do is debunk fake news or a manipulative text, or we can check if a politician's affirmation is true or false, but it's very hard to go in depth of the subject. One of the reasons misinformation and disinformation is not a mainstream subject in Romania is because, one of the sources of disinformation and misinformation is the party that won the elections in Romania. and the party who governs right now. So it's really hard to address a problem in the mainstream and bring it in the public opinion if the party who should do that is spreading actually misinformation. And actually you can check that, because if you look at what Sputnik Romania is posting in a day, you can find the exact narratives 2 or 3 days later being spread by politicians who should protect the interests of the citizens, because they are even ministers sometimes. So I think this is another challenge for us, and you also mentioned it, that it's a threat when one of your politicians is doing it, and they are doing it at whole new levels now that we have social media. Another thing I wanted to talk about is that it's really hard for third party aggressors to manipulate or make good misinformation campaigns in a country that has a strong and healthy media. And I think we address this not too often, but I think that what we need to do in both our countries is finding a mechanism that helps journalists make their own projects and fund independent projects, even if they're small. It is very important that we have many voices, that we have many sources who can deal with the narratives that come from aggressors, not only from Russia. They come from many sides, as I was saying, they can come from our own politicians. It's very, very important that we create or develop mechanisms that can fund independent media projects and journalists that are set to discover the truth. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to you and to find similarities in both countries. And I do believe that both Ukraine and Romania have already been very good example of strength of civil society. And the people of both Ukraine and Romania already managed to show that they may have some influence on politicians. And I do hope that we will make further efforts to limit at least the threat coming from our own politicians. So thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Anna Shelest, a very good friend, colleague of mine, who is also combining her activities as the editor of the magazine, political journal, and think tank analyst at Ukrainian prison. So Anna, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Sergey. Good morning. It's still morning? Yeah. Just for those who are here. Thank you for being here. Definitely, and one way we're using the words hybrid and information warfare so often that people can be tired of them, but at the same time, as soon as the problem is not disappearing, it should be made as much as possible. And just last week, a big report was published by the Office of European Integration of the governments of Ukraine. And you have 3 or 5 authors in this panel. Sergey and Alexander was there. It is now available only in Ukrainian, but I hope that in about months it will be also available in English. It is lessons from the hybrid warfare decade, so 10 years of our experience. And with the recommendations, and what is interesting that I will talk more about that report of the findings over there, But why I started from it, because one of the first recommendations that participants of the huge conference that was the preface for the report and of the report itself is saying that we need to have the topic of hybrid warfare and information warfare constantly on the international agenda. As far as we're starting to forget about the topic and not discussing it, we are becoming vulnerable because we are relaxing. And considering that you never can be prepared to hybrid warfare, because as much as you're analyzing, however, every time when you're already attacked by the hybrid methods, it means that you're losing. It means that you are not prepared enough because the methods and instruments can be developed. Even the definitely, I don't like when we start to speak about hybrid warfare as something from 2014. I always joke that, sorry, ancient Greeks were perfect in hybrid warfare. The only thing is that they didn't have the same instruments and channels of delivering the information that we have now. However, the basic methods and the logic behind the hybrid warfare is something that we have been aware for at least from the 2000 years. And even the term hybrid warfare is nothing about Russia, but started by NATO in 2006 because of Hezbollah activities in Israel-Lebanon war. However, definitely the scope and the blatant use of the hybrid methods is what makes us so not only interested but aware and made all of us busy, unfortunately. One of the interesting things that definitely the discussion during the conference back in November, even our report asked, first of all, can we be prepared to the hybrid warfare? And should we punish for the hybrid warfare? Or should it be the same, let's say, asymmetrical reaction to it? And here I definitely would like to make one step back to our discussion and to start from the phrase that very often we are mixing hybrid and information warfare. And without any intention to undermine the importance and level of information warfare that is happening now, and definitely not undermine that of what all of my colleagues in this session will speak. However, it's definitely it seems to be necessary to emphasize that hybrid warfare is not only information warfare, because information warfare is only part of the hybrid warfare. And definitely the second big part is the cyber warfare, but again, not only. Because when we speak about cyber warfare, it's, many people also think that it's only about Facebook or some of the social networks, and also put it in the basket of the information warfare. But it is about protection of the critical infrastructure. Let's remember the cases, for example, that happened with Ukraine a few years ago when the electrical stations in the western regions were suddenly shut down. Or when the government structures in Estonia in 2007 suddenly received that much of the cyber attacks that neither banking system nor the governmental structures could effectively work because the level of the e-democracy and e-government in that country is so high. And most of our countries are moving to this. So critical infrastructure, e-government, banking system, all of this depends on the cyber, currently, cyber sphere. So definitely we are coming to the cyber warfare. And by the way, for example, in Ukraine, cyber warfare was included as the fifth domain of the warfare, equal to sea, land, air, and airspace. NATO, for example, is only discussing this, and in the first documents finally at the Brussels summit in July, we started to see the notion that cyber warfare is becoming the real domain. In practical, it is better than in strategic documents. For example, what about Romania? And here is interesting, Romania is in charge of the NATO Trust Fund on cybersecurity for Ukraine. However, at the same time, do we see the same level of elaboration at the national level in terms of the cybersecurity in the country, the strategic documents and others? And that is, it seems to me, the topic that can be of the bilateral not cooperation, but at least information exchange about how it's possible to define the cybersphere as the domain of the warfare. I will not go deep because of time in the economic warfare, in the interference in the political sphere, in the energy security spheres. All of them are part of the hybrid warfare. Because of several reasons. When we speak about hybrid warfare, we are not speaking about conquering the country. We're speaking about subordinating the country. So you don't need to have the physical border with the country to be affected or to be under the impact of the hybrid warfare. So here, definitely, if you are the country that is interesting for the source of the hybrid warfare, doesn't matter where you're situated. And for many, it seems to me, this half a year is especially important because when we see the logic of especially when we go to the Russian, Chinese have their specific aspect. That's why probably this session I'm not going to speak about this. But when we speak about Russians, what they're usually trying to undermine or support. Euroscepticism, major skepticism, trying to undermine the trust into the government and government as an institution, not leftist or rightist, but government as an institution that can cope with the problems in the society, social stability, ethnic minorities, and the trust in the military. So that is the biggest topic that usually you can find in the hybrid warfare, especially with the constants of the information warfare. So usually, which countries are especially under the target? Those who have the presidency in European Union, or those who are chairing the OSCE in this particular year. So let's say that this year or half a year when this presidency is happening, it is the very, very top and hot topic, hot period for the to be exposed to such a hybrid warfare. And here I will return to the few of the recommendations, because our authors of the report had 28 very good recommendations practical about the hybrid warfare.
Are you have only 2 minutes to...
Yes, that's exactly. That's the way that I will check only few that is really important for us over here. What is interesting that all experts and all speakers, most of whom were governmental, experts were not governmental, but speakers were governmental, they said that we need a very good cooperation between the government and civil society. And here, civil women/expert society, it's not just NGOs. Why? Because first of all, government not always can have the sufficient amount of time and resources for analyzing, and that is what civil society can propose. The second is that civil society has better mechanisms for raising awareness and for teaching public about what is happening. They are more free to name and blame who are guilty, and also they have more possibilities for cooperation through the borders. So for the international cooperation, that gives more flexibility and more possibilities for the cooperation that sometimes governments need more time. So in this case, all of our efforts named, doesn't matter, cybersphere or transatlantic or information warfare, all named that civil society and government should cooperate, both for research and for building resilience. The second was definitely named building resilience. Nobody can evaluate what does mean the sufficient level of resilience, because it is something that should be developed constantly, and also because it is something more for the long term. It's great that you made the example of your 10-year-old child, because this child already will be much better resilient in 10 years, more critical to the information that they received, other than we, because we used to trust to a certain source of information. Then the third very important recommendation that was given, that we need to start to name and blame the sources. Doesn't matter of the information, of the fake news, or of the cyber attacks. As soon as we can prove, a Skripal case was a very good example that how the reaction changed, how the international community changed in their reaction and perception when we managed to name the exact people, when we managed to name the exact countries. And in this case, we should not be afraid to name our own politicians, not thinking that it is only when they are becoming useful idiots, let's be honest, or when in their political campaigns, they would like to use the same mechanism because they say, okay, if they use why we can't use the same method. So as soon as we as a civil society are ready to name and blame, it is very healthy for the society in this case. And yes, the last, I remember, that's why I'm not going to the other very important. And the last but not the least, it is should be punished. And that's that I wanted to leave as the open question probably for this session. Can be punished, should be punished, and how to find balance, especially when we speak about the information warfare, between the censorship and the punishment when it is necessary. Because if we don't punish it in the hybrid warfare, it means that we allow the continuation and we leave the freedom of action for those who use the hybrid methods.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. Well, by now it looks that according to Katerina and Guta, everybody is threatened, notwithstanding age, notwithstanding country, and Hannah also highlighted by which means everybody is threatened, what are the instruments of threat and challenge. And now we will proceed with our session, and I give the floor to my colleague from Ukraine, Alexandra Tserkhanovska, who is going to show you how it works on ground. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, friends, I'm thrilled to be here today and to represent the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group of Ukraine Crisis Media Center, which was formed in March 2014, just when the annexation of Crimea was underway. But at the moment, leading experts of the field gathered together to create a platform for developing and communicating solutions for what we hope that at the moment could be solved with political means. But unfortunately, as history demonstrated, the conflict continued to evolve with Russian aggression in the eastern regions of Ukraine. So unfortunately, the need for our services still prevails. I'd like to start this presentation with a video, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I can't really make any promises. So if we can have the video, please.
Уже достигнута договоренность Москва-Киев-Вашингтон. Раздел Украину, как компромисс пока, приличный. Левый берег России, правый берег пока остается за Киевом. То есть почти вся восточная часть Украины возвращается в Россию, как компромисс. В будущем и правый берег отдает России. Это не государство, это бизнес-вайна.
Напомню, Украина, слово в Польше. Русское слово, оно не такая. Русское слово, это Беларусь. Все, нет там никакого государства. Потому что государство должно быть не только атрибуты в виде какого-то президента и парламента, должен быть суверенитет.
В среднем говорят, что если человек разобрал, то это около 1,5 миллиона долларов. Украина за 70 миллиардов. Я посчитал, 70 миллиардов по региону 1,5 миллиона. 46 666, 600, 60, 60, 60. Не миллион пересечки Украины. Нет, впереди.
Украина это не цивилизованное государство. нынешний режим нацистский, он выдал такую повестку дня.
В Украине решили выпустить мемуары одного из идеологов нацизма Юзефа Геббельса. По данным СМИ, Харьковское издательство готовится отправить в печать дневники нацистского преступника, который был министром пропаганды гитлеровской Германии. Как сок сказано в аннотации, без этих записей невозможно полное понимание национал-социализма.
Новый скандал на Украине. Депутат Рады распевает песни, славящие Гитлера.
Собственную иллюстрацию могут заменить уличные виселицы. С таким заявлением выступил заместитель Коломойского. И на фоне всего происходящего в это нетрудно поверить. В школах Украины появился новый учебник «Бандеровская азбука», в которой главный герой юный воин УПА.
Заселяют Одессу, Херсон, Николаев, заселяют другие регионы. Вывозят крестьян из Галичины и завозят по регионам, выбивают им должности в управлении, учителей, еще что-то, уже удаляют людей, то есть полная ассимиляция, украинизация и практика.
Украинские власти со следующего учебного года отменяют в украинских школах 2 курса. Это курс мировой литературы, его не будет, и курс мировой истории.
Уже пытаются отменить уроки, чтобы не было Деда Мороза, потому что он Санта-Клаус и Николай Николаевич, потому что русский Дед Мороз.
Есть факты о каннибализме в Доме профсоюзов. То есть там есть слова, когда человек говорит, здесь едят человечину. То есть и человек ходит с салфетками.
Я вот своими глазами видела, когда подругу мою насиловали на глазах у ее мужа, а потом его же расстреляли на наших глазах. Мы чудом оттуда сбежали.
Вы понимаете, что оружие поставляется на внутриукраинскую гражданскую войну, где ни одна сторона заведомо не может одержать над другой военную победу. Со стороны американцев это просто стремление Украину уничтожить.
Гражданская война на Украине окончательно вышла за пределы Юго-Востока. После бойни в Мукачево, взрывы в Ильякове, во Львове есть пострадавшие.
И только мольбы, так сказать, западных стран перед лицом военного режима Путина позволят остановить наступление армии Беларуси, армии Донбасса и освобождение дальнейших территорий.
Страна буквально умирает. Вот на этой неделе из Киева пришло сообщение, что население Украины за минувший год без учета Крыма и Донбасса сократилось аж на 200 тысяч человек.
На Украине готовится 7-ю внеплановую мобилизацию, причем призывать теперь в армию планируется не с 18, а с 16 лет. Об этом свидетельствуют документы, перехваченные разведкой Донецкой республики.
Российский народ поддерживает российскую власть